What's going on, noobs? My name is Rory, aka the Perpetual Noob, and welcome to my review of Destiny's latest expansion, Rise of Iron. Rise of Iron was released on September 20th, 2016 on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. All footage seen in this review is from the PS4 version. Rise of Iron had some pre-order bonuses, but those amounted to a reskinned Gjallarhorn, Sparrow, and a Sparrow Horn. The horn is actually pretty great. It can be heard everywhere. Rise of Iron also came with an item that allowed players to instantly put one of their guardians at level 40. That is what I did with a hunter, and that is the footage seen here. It was pretty sweet because I was able to transfer my level 40 weapons from my warlock to my hunter to start right away with Rise of Iron. Rise of Iron's story deals with the fall of the Iron Lords 100 years ago. All but one sacrificed themselves to contain Siva, a technological plague. The fallen House of Devils has unearthed the Siva plague and used it to augment themselves and become more powerful. Lord Saladin rallies the Guardians to fight against and contain the re-emerged threat and become the next generation of Iron Lords. At least, that's what the wiki says. If I didn't have my brother with me for most of my first run through this, I would have understood the story as ancient power, Guardians tried to control it, ancient power got out of control, Guardians had to seal it and hide it. The wiki suggests that Siva was a known threat, but the quests and cutscenes of Rise of Iron describe the scenario as the early Guardians wished to use Siva to create a grand and wondrous thing, to better humanity with it. It was only after trying to control Siva that everything went horribly wrong. Fans of the lore of Destiny will get more out of this story as it explains what happened to big historical figures such as Yolder, Timur, and Saladin, to name a few. For me, the story was a big meh. What really bothers me about this story is how trite it is. The Iron Lords, purported to be legendary in power and skill and everything else, lost almost all to merely seal away Siva. Then, within just a few missions, first time through was under 2 hours of gameplay, a player on their own or in a fire team of only 3 manages to destroy Siva almost in its entirety, accomplishing what the myriad of Iron Lords could not. Classic. Oh. But on to some good stuff. Rise of Iron brings quite a lot of new content to Destiny. It expands the Earth map to include what is called the Plague Lands, which is comprised of 11 new areas. From the Plague Lands Patrol, players can access the original Earth location, but they are reskinned to look infested with Siva. Of course, a player could patrol Earth, and everything would look normal again, so that's cheap. There's even a new Rise of Iron specific patrol called Quarantine, and they can only be accessed in the Plague Lands. There is a new social space on Earth called the Iron Temple. It's much like the Reef from the House of Wolves expansion, except everything is related to Rise of Iron, including Rise of Iron specific weekly bounties that can really only be accomplished within the Plague Lands. So that's a nice touch. I understand that the Taken King was supposed to show how scary the Taken were, but putting quests and bounties and missions across the entire Destiny universe was a little tiring, so this is a nice change with Rise of Iron. There are 8 story missions. There really isn't much that stands out with any of them, aside from perhaps the first mission, where players get to ride, albeit incredibly briefly, on rails in a gondola, and the big finale, but everything else is just the same. Kill anything that isn't a Guardian. I suppose there is a little more mission variety in that I can only remember the one portion of a mission in the Taken King where players had to sneak around enemies. What I'm saying is that I'd love to see more missions that are not solved with kill all the things. There are new quests, including several exotic weapon quests, for some oldies like Thorn, and new like the Outbreak Prime, which are pretty cool, albeit some are a little cryptic to access, aside from the Gjallarhorn one, which starts as soon as players finish the main quest. There are 3 new strikes. The addition of the Splicer enemy type does mean that some strikes can play differently because players will be facing Splicers instead of Taken or whatever was originally supposed to be in the strike, so the new enemy type adds a little more strike variety. There's a new class-agnostic item slot called Artifact, and there are 8 Iron Lord artifacts to collect, each tied to a particular deceased Iron Lord, and each with a crazy ability. There are other non-Iron Lord artifacts, but they have abilities akin to a class item, rather than what the Iron Lord artifacts provide. One Iron Lord artifact grants players the ability to sprint forever. Another grants players the chance to turn an enemy into a temporary ally. These are actually a pretty fun addition to the game because they can strongly augment a particular playstyle and boost certain subclasses, like the Memory of Fellwinter artifact, which removes a player's super but grants a player an extra grenade and use of their melee ability. There are new Crucible maps and a new Crucible game mode called Supremacy, which I like to call Call of Duty Kill Confirmed, Destiny style. There are also a ton of new weapons and armors. However, I have heard that many are simply previously existing gear with new skins. I'm not sure I care because I've never had enough weapons and armor to notice. But I will say that the raid gear, which is brand new, looks awesome. Oh! And there's a jump puzzle for one of the Siva cluster collectibles. Yup. And this is after I already accomplished this jump puzzle with my Warlock. Thanks, Destiny Physics. As is customary with every Destiny expansion, the max light level has been increased. What's great this time is that players don't lose access to what they had before this expansion, because Rise of Iron finally just adds to Destiny rather than overwriting and gating off parts of what was previously accessible. To me, that is a huge positive. The gear and light levels are a little confusing at first. Uncommon items max out at 205. Rare engrams max out at 365. But rare named items max out at 385. Legendary items max out at 385. And exotic items max out at 400. Want that max light level? It's going to take a lot of time in Archon's Forge and the raid. But a nice thing they do is that the light levels of items you get is directly related to your current light level. So if you get a legendary while your light level is beyond 365, that legendary will most likely be beyond 365 as well. Actually, I think it's guaranteed to be beyond your current light level by at least 1 point. So the grind can take a while because you're trying to get from 365 to 400 and you're only going by like 1 level at a time, and to get to that 1 level you've got to have a full set of equipment at that light level or beyond. Long story short, it can take a while to grind to the maximum light level. There is a new raid called Wrath of the Machine, and overall, it is awesome. Full disclosure, my first experience with the raid was being carried by 5 people who knew the raid very well. However, I shall contend that even if that was not the case, I would have enjoyed the raid greatly. Normal mode recommends light level 370, so players are going to have to grind a bit before they can safely proceed. Hard mode is at 390, and with max light level set at 400, good luck, because that 10 level difference doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. There are a lot of parts and sections. Every area is brand new or an extension of a previously explored area. There are a ton of new set pieces and some new mechanics. Does the raid boil down to kill all the things? Yes, but the variety for objectives does a fantastic job of masking that drudgery. Here is one of my favorite parts of the entire raid, and yes, it has almost no action. Why is it my favorite? Because it actually requires 6 people. It requires a full raid fire team. So far as I know, people can't fake it and do this with fewer than 6. And that has been one of my biggest complaints about Destiny's raids in the past, is that eventually they can all, except this part, be completed with fewer than 6 people. Some can be completed with only 3. It's a raid. It's supposed to be some of the hardest content in the game. We can bring 6 people in. Why not make content that requires 6 people at all times? So thank you, Bungie, for that part. I can't wait to see more raid content that requires 6 people. The final boss fight of the raid is intense and utilizes just about every mechanic introduced in Rise of Iron, plus some others introduced from earlier expansions like Scorch Cannons. It really is a wonderful culmination of the Rise of Iron DLC. If I had not had the chance to play the raid prior to the completion of this review, my thoughts on Rise of Iron would have been significantly worse. So now we come to the portion of the review that I like to call the too long didn't watch portion. Rise of Iron is an expansion to Destiny, not a brand new game, and as such I'm judging it on only so many facets: story and what it adds to Destiny. Rise of Iron's story is meh. I think it's trite and does not bring anything meaningful to the lore of Destiny. I think it would have been better to leave the Iron Lords as the legendary memories they were purported to be, or, give them an actual legendary story. Where Rise of Iron shines is in what it adds to Destiny. The new gear, the Rise of Iron specific quest/bounty structure, the new areas, the Archon's Forge, the raid all feel like a solid, well-designed expansion. Yes, the reskinning of some gear, definitely some areas, and the Fallen as splicers, though they do have some different abilities too, is pretty lazy and is a detractor for me. But there's a lot of good here too. Mainly the raid. So, the final score? 8 out of 10? Yeah, I think that's fair. Good, but again, Rise of Iron only had so much to be judged on, and fell short in a couple of places. And let's be real, story almost has no real bearing on Destiny. It's about the loot and the gameplay, which I think Rise of Iron shined on. That's my review of Rise of Iron. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of Rise of Iron in the comments below. I am the Perpetual Noob, and I'll see you next time.